afternoon, everyone. So, a planner trying not to use any acronyms is quite a challenge. So
Go on, you can do it.
I will do my best. So, what I'll try and talk about today, what is green space? Because it's, you know, a lot of people have got different kind of views as to what is it, and I'm sure the list I've got is probably completely different from what you may consider it to be. How can communities get involved? I'm limiting my kind of talk to pretty much in terms of what planning gets involved in. How can we use green space to absorb more emissions? How's it decided where the green space is built on? A bit about Greenbelt, because I think that's what kind of a lot of people would be interested in. And a little bit on biodiversity net gain, which is something that came out of the Environment Act. So what is green space? So there's a whole load, but from a planning point of view, for a start, is it private or public green space? Because there's a whole range of different things. So just from someone's back garden is an area of green space which can have an impact on the climate. Private land that might have no built development on it. Parks and formal gardens, so this is where Elmbridge has got over 100 different sites, parks, playgrounds, etc. Woodland countryside, Elmbridge has 20 countryside sites, including Esher Commons, Triple SI, which is a site of special scientific interest. There's absolutely loads of acronyms for different kind of nature conservation requirements. Rivers, so we've got the River Thames, River Mole, River Wey. Outdoor sports facilities, so in terms of pitches for all sorts of things. Informal green space in housing areas. There's a lot of housing estates that have got a bit of green in between the houses, which all contributes to green space. Play areas, skateboard parks, allotments, which is I'll leave to Walton charities to deal with more from that side of things. Cemeteries, and then another acronym, SAND, something in terms of just on the edge of the borough, we've got something called the Thames Basin Heath Special Protection Area. It's about ground nesting birds. And part of the mitigation for that is something called suitable alternative natural green space. So if developments are putting housing near to one of those kind of areas, they need to provide alternative natural green space. So it's another type of green space. So why does development happen? So fundamentally, a need for different types of housing, employment, schools, colleges, this site here, and other developments. In terms of why does development happen, people have the choice as to how they use their own land. So people that have got a garden, you have a choice as to how do you use your garden. The council land, so the council has got the Green Spaces team, which is another part of the department that kind of looks after all the parks, countryside area. And private land, you don't always need planning permission to develop land. So there's something called permitted development. So that's kind of very basic as to how can communities get involved. So if there is a planning application, I'll try to kind of stand to the side of it, is you can comment on planning applications. So there's various different ways that you can get involved. There's something called a planning alert system that legally we write to everyone that's just got an adjoining boundary to a site. But you can sign up on Elmbridge's website to be notified about anything within up to 1 kilometre from your property. So you could choose, or you can just go on the website and comment on planning applications. And we get comments from Australia on a planning application. You don't have to be even in the same country. The local plan, this is about moving forward. How do we plan for the future? Where does future development go? All different types of things. You can comment on local plan consultations. In terms of absorbing more emissions, a lot of climate change in terms of sustainability comes through what's called building regulations. So it's after planning where you have to comply with certain regulations. But as part of what everyone could do, how retaining green spaces for a start is kind of, you can avoid there being harm rather than having to mitigate something. Plant trees. Everyone can plant, you know, if you've got space in your garden, plant trees, don't need to have an application to do that. Improving habitats. This is something that the government through the Environment Act is trying to improve habitat for every development, what's called a biodiversity net gain. So certain sizes of development have to do a 10% improvement. And there's habitats could be grassland, it could be kind of water, all different sorts of things. Choice of planting. What you choose to plant could be more attractive to, in terms, so for example, bottom right, Does anyone recognise what that type of tree is in terms of the bark? London plane, exactly. So, because a London plane absorbs pollution and then it falls off. So it's a natural way of trying to absorb emissions. And you see a lot of it in London, and in terms particularly where there's kind of heavy roads, but you don't find it everywhere. Bottom left, you've got the green wall. So having a living wall rather than just it being brick or render. So, and then top left, do you just put your driveway through to just tarmac, hard standing, or do you try to minimise that so you can have as much kind of green space as you can? Great, how do you decide? Just get through these last slides because I'm going to be using up my time. Planning applications, so we consider it against policies, and it's all about planning balance. So it's not a black and white, it's a question of balance. Is there a need for housing against what's the harm to the climate, to sustainability? And as I said, at the bottom one, a lot of things don't even need planning permission. So under permitted development, you can do a lot of things. You could develop a lot of your own garden, which can have a big impact. So we've got a couple of policies in what's called our local plan, so the core strategy. And there's two key policies which, in terms of green space per se, there's policies to try to retain it where possible. So this one, protect, enhance, manage diverse network of green infrastructure. And we also talk about blue infrastructure now in terms of rivers, in terms of flood risk mitigation. And then the other policy is about local green spaces protected from inappropriate development. And so it's about, if you're going to develop on a bit of green space, you need to try to provide alternative. But there's lots of policies that try to retain green space. Greenbelt, this is what gets in all the papers and news. I'm sure lots of people are going to worry about it. And there's lots of policy to try to protect the greenbelt. And so we've got specific policies at Elmbridge and nationally to try to protect that. But the government, you were seeing, has talked about we need 1.5 million houses before the end of Parliament. And it's nowhere near getting that in terms of delivery. And so they've relaxed the greenbelt rules to a certain degree. And so there's certain things that so at the end of last year, what's called the National Planning Policy Framework was changed. In February, they brought new guidance out. There's something called grey belt and golden rules, which I could spend all day going because it's pretty complicated. But another key point is the green belt. It's not always green. So all of these sites are in the green belt. So top left is probably what you'd kind of imagine, green fields. Top middle, Whiteley Village, one of the first affordable housing schemes in the country. You've got a lot, there's all the housing on that site. On the right, where we are now, Brooklands College, we're in the green belt here. And then bottom left, Wayland's industrial estate is in the green belt, but it's a waste transfer station and it's all sorts of waste and what you consider to be bad neighbour uses, but it's in the green belt. So not all green belt is green. And Elmbridge probably got one of the higher percentages of green belt in the country, 57% of the borough. If you're in Woking, it's probably closer to 90%. So that kind of shows you just at a glance what parts of the borough are green belt. And so that's what we're kind of trying to protect where we can. Grey belt and golden rules, there are so many different things that the government's trying to, in terms of, yes, it's a question of, is it inappropriate development or appropriate development in the green belt? So it's quite a complicated thing, but there's whole things about grey belt test, about meeting the purposes of the green belt strongly, which again, you could spend all day trying to kind of explain. Is there an unmet need for development? So from a housing point of view, Elmbridge would need to provide almost 1,900 dwellings a year to meet housing need. The figure is probably closer to 300 or 400 that we deliver each year. So there's almost always an unmet need. So any development from that kind of assessment there will be an unmet need. And that has tripled, the need figure, the way that government calculates it, has tripled under the latest guidance. A sustainable location. So when we think about sustainable development, sustainable location, again, that's not a very clear definition, but effectively it's relatively close to town. If there's an alternative mode of transport, so if you can use a bike or public transport, then that's one of the criteria. But again, it's all quite complicated in terms of how you address that. And then finally, biodiversity. And again, the Environment Act, it talks about requiring larger developments to contribute an improvement to the biodiversity. And there's like an interactive metric that the developers have to fill out that tries to show what it is. But there's lots of exclusions, so if it's less than 25 square metres, if someone says it's a self-build, they're building for themselves to live in. But the government are also, at the moment, considering, well, this is stopping development happening, so they're looking to relax that for up to 10 dwellings. So there's a lot of things that are trying to protect, but the government are trying to ease up on those questions. So hopefully that's just a whistle-stop tour. And I'm amazed I didn't get any red cards, so thank you very much. So I shall give a pass over.